Hi there. So we're a little bit behind now because of the snowstorm. So I thought I would record a couple short videos to try to get us back up to speed. So apologies in advance if you hear random sounds of snow falling from rooftops or my dog in the background. But yeah, here we go. I wanted to start with a short video about this director, Lois Weber. Now, you may recognize this picture from the little image that shows up on the Canvas site. This is a real photograph of her directing cinema, not a sort of stock photo like the ones we looked at on the first day of class. And indeed, because this was the oldie-timey days, she does have a bullhorn with her name emblazoned on it there that she used to talk to the actors and crew. Seated next to her is the cinematographer who has not one but two film cameras that he's operating on set. And Lois Weber was a real forerunner and founder of the contemporary cinema universe and is often forgotten. So I take some time out of my class to talk a little bit about her so that you'll sort of remember and share about this sometimes forgotten legendary grande dame of the cinema. So there's a quote here from film historian Anthony Slide who says, along with D.W. Griffith, Weber was the American cinema's first genuine auteur, a filmmaker involved in all aspects of production and one who utilized the motion picture to put across her own ideas and philosophies. She directed 135 films, wrote 114, and starred in about 100 of them. In this quote, the film historian compares her to D.W. Griffith, who some of you may have heard of. He's often sort of lauded as one of the sort of founders of the feature film as we currently know it. He invented a lot of techniques that are still used today. He innovated on a lot of techniques that are still used today, including the close up and cross cutting two different narratives at one time to show the sort of simultaneity and to sort of increase suspense. But he was also kind of a jerk. His legendary film, the first blockbuster of all of cinema, was this film, Birth of a Nation, that chronicled not only the Civil War, but the rise of the KKK and did so from a sort of distinctly uh, pro KKK point of view. He based this novel on a book that saw slavery as a sort of benign quirk of the South rather than the sort of traumatic genocide that it was, and his films reflected that. They were protested at the time by the NAACP and others, but he was sort of unapologetic. So D.W. Griffith is often remembered, and I'm not going to force you to watch any of his films ever. And I wish Lois Weber was remembered instead. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She was working at the same period of time and also made a huge impact on the field, having a lot of firsts. So I'm going to tell you about some of her firsts. She lived from 1879 to 1939, so right at the sort of beginning of filmmaking, still born, 20 years before Hitchcock, who we're studying more in depth in this class. She was one of the first directors to experiment with sound back in the 1910s, before anyone was. Was trying to use phonographs to help give a sort of fuller cinematic experience. She was also the first director to use the split screen effect, where you have more than one. Sorry, that's the snow. More than one image showing up on the screen at the same time. She did that in her short Suspense, which I'll have you watch at home. She had the first film portraying a rabbi in 1913. She was from a Protestant family in Pennsylvania, so she wasn't herself Jewish, but had been raised in multicultural worlds and also saw that in Hollywood, where she had moved to. This was the first film to portray cross-cultural marriage in a positive light. She was also the first American woman to direct a full-length feature film, like a big old regular movie. It was an adaptation of Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice, also a play concerned with cross-cultural relations between people of different religions. She also had the first pornographic, non-pornographic, full frontal nudity scene in 1915. Of course, as soon as film was invented, people used it to try to make the earliest cinematic porn. She, however, was using nudity in her 1915 film in an allegorical sense to sort of represent justice and purity. Despite the fact that it was non-pornographic, it was still banned in Ohio and caused riots in New York City. An interesting thing about this film, she was also the first director to innovate with the idea of a closed set. A closed set is when you send the whole film crew away, other than the absolutely necessary people, probably the cinematographer and the director, to work with actors on scenes that might be sensitive, often involving nudity, or sometimes violence, or any kind of sexuality. So she innovated on the idea of a closed set. She directed some of the first films about abortion and birth control, one in 1916. She was in 1916 the highest paid director in the United States, making 5K a week, which at that time was just an astronomical amount of money. Um, she was the first American woman to found and run her own film studio. She was known as a star maker, so she would find new talent and bring them in and have get them agents and contracts and all of that, as well as managing all of the film and sort of technical requirements of a film studio. She predicted color films and 3D films. In 1921, she was fairly certain that color would be out soon, but I love that she also predicted the 3D film. She didn't quite understand that we would need to have glasses to watch it, but she had a vision. And she also directed the first anti-capitalist feature film, a film called The Blot, which was a critique of the kind of wealth inequity and the particular ways that poverty affected women in the United States. Yeah, so she was really a trailblazer. This is a quote that I wanted us to think about for a minute that she said. She said, "A real director should be absolute. He or she, in this case, alone knows the effects he wants to produce, and he alone should have authority in the arrangement, cutting, titling, or anything else that may seem necessary to do to the finished product. What other artist has his work interfered with by someone else? We ought to realize that the work of a picture director worthy of a name is creative." So there's that word authority again. We talked about how the term auteur in French uh, it just means the word author, authorship. What does it mean for a film to be the author of a film? Here she is in 1916 advocating for the authority and the authorship of a film director at a time when the film director role was still really very much being established. This is another way we can think of her as a first, because this concept of the auteur theory really didn't get developed until 1950s in France with one of the first big uh, intellectual magazines about cinema, Cahiers du Cinéma. So, this quote is a little bit in tension with some of the things we're going to talk about in this class. We're also talking in this class about how collaborative filmmaking is, how in fact you can't do everything by yourself and you need collaborators, whether they're holding the camera, snapping, the slate, acting in front of it, or writing the music for it afterwards. And here's Lois saying we must have absolute control of cutting, titling, anything else that might seem necessary. Of course, there's a couple of reasons why she's doing this. One is that, she was a woman and probably in general was given less authority over her own art form than other people were. We can think ahead actually to Hitchcock's wife, Alma, who was not really given the authority that she might have been able to have had and been a film director on her own. Another reason is that this just at the time when the studios were starting to take control of everything. So Lois firmly opposed producerial interference and censorship. Back to that nudity that she had in her film. The censors were very interested in getting in the way and messing with things. There's this quote that she says, the producers select the stories, select the cast, tell you how much you can pay for a picture and how long you have to make it in, Weber complained. All this could be borne, but when they tell you that they will also cut your picture, that is too much. All right, so she was resisting that kind of control from the producers. I love this picture of her. I think this picture is from like the 20s, like great fashion, those great shoes. And she's sitting here with another woman working. I think this was in and around her studio. Not only did she run a film studio, she was also known for helping found the Girls Studio Club, which was also known as the home of young ladies who make moving pictures in Hollywood. I think someone should make a movie about this lady's work with the Girls Studio Club. I would absolutely watch that feature film. Anyway, to bring us forward into the present, I want to contrast some of what she has been saying with some of the ideas of Anne Bogart, who's one of the theater directors we mentioned on the first day of class. Anne Bogart says, many young directors make the big mistake of assuming that directing is about being in control, telling others what to do, having ideas, and getting what you ask for. I do not believe that these abilities are the qualities that make a good director. Directing is about feeling, about being in the room with other people. It's about having a feel for time and space, about breathing and responding fully to the situation at hand, being able to plunge and encourage a plunge into the unknown at the right moment. So as we're working, I'd like us to have both of these devils on our shoulder, right? The Lois Weber saying, you must have control, nobody should tell you what to do. And the Anne Bogart saying, directing is not about being in control. It's about encouraging a plunge into the unknown. I think if we balance both of these, we can find a good place to be as directors. And one last quote before I let you go. This is from the book that we're reading about directing for actors. And this is a quote I think that can help us navigate between those 2 points. And she talks about the language of permission. So I encourage you to think about using the language of permission with your collaborators. You don't want to be a micromanager who instructs an actor to play a certain verb on a certain line or orders the actors to apply a certain as if adjustment to a particular moment. The language of permission gives you conversation openers like, I had an idea that I was thinking might be worth trying. Or, what do you think of punishing on this line instead of begging? If an actor's performance could be better, let the actor know. Indeed, they want you to. But micromanaging every adjustment and transition is a horror show. So instead of telling the actor, switch from anger to fear on this line, consider suggesting, I'm wondering whether there might be a transition that could happen around here. Or even be completely direct. I think we're missing a transition. Do you want to figure it out for yourself or shall we talk about it? You can also use this language of permission with cinematographers, with the people designing your lights, in the editing room with your editor. The language of permission allows us to work together without micromanaging. And I think that's the goal. Thank you so much. My dog has showed up for the last moment of this film. Say hi, Junie. Hi. All right. Thanks a lot. And see you in class.